Welcome back to Flipping Dust. Today we are making a tutorial on how to change out an old toilet. Now I'm working in a bathroom that I'm going to be painting the walls in this bathroom. So it's a perfect opportunity. When I'm taking this toilet out, the walls are going to be exposed. I'll be able to paint the wall behind the toilet tank very easily. Then I'm going to let that paint dry and install the toilet. I'm working in an older place and the floors are a little, well, let's just say they're not so level, and the toilet is old, so it just needs to be replaced. But one thing that I noticed when I was first touring this property is when the toilet is flushed, there's a little bit of a leak that comes out from the bottom of the toilet. Now, I'm really glad that I noticed this leak during the touring of the property because it gave me a heads up as to what to expect. A lot of times when a toilet is installed, a little bead of caulking is placed around the base of that toilet. Now that's great because it creates a seal. It creates a little bit stronger vacuum sometimes when the toilet is flushed. But one thing it does is it can be deceiving because you can't necessarily tell if there's a leak coming from the base of the toilet. A lot of times the reason there's a leak from the base of the toilet is there's a wax ring that sits underneath that toilet, which then directs the flow of water into your sewage line. A lot of times these wax rings are going to fail. They fail for a couple different reasons, primarily just because of age. Because the floor is not level in this particular bathroom, it also creates a little bit of extra stress on one part of that wax ring versus the other parts. So I'm going to flush the toilet in a moment so you can see how the leak is presenting and how we go about fixing it. Now I'm going to flush the toilet so you can see what happens when the water is coming out of the base, that little leak that I was just mentioning. I apologize for the stains on the toilet. This is from the previous owners. But when you're renovating a place, there are all kinds of disgusting things that you're going to run into. This is just run-of-the-mill. I'm going to pull the camera in. You can see that little bit of water that's starting to come out of the base there. There's a separation between the caulking and the actual toilet seat itself. It takes a little bit of time. It tells me it's a very slow leak, which hopefully means it's not a drastic problem underneath. Again, I'm expecting it's just going to be the wax ring. It could be the collar to the sewer line, but I really don't think it's going to be. But we're going to find out together. The first step in removing a toilet is, of course, disconnecting the water line. So first I'm going to turn off the water supply. And then I'm going to flush the toilet again so that I drain as much water out of it as possible. I'm going to change into some other clothes and then we're going to start to take this toilet apart. Now that I've flushed the toilet, most of the water that was in this tank has now been flushed down. There's going to be a little bit of water that's remaining in that tank. So what I do is I take a sponge and I take a bucket and I dip the sponge into the water, squeeze it out into the bucket, and just repeat that process until you've taken all the water out of the tank. A lot of plumbers don't do this step. They just lift the entire tank out at a later point, and that just makes so much mess. You're gonna understand why it makes a mess in a few minutes. But first, let me just show you. You take the tank lid off. I'm gonna put it to the side. Now you're gonna see that there's still water in this tank. So I'm just going to use this sponge. I'm gonna soak up the remaining water and I'm gonna squeeze the sponge out into this bucket. I'm gonna need to repeat this process a few times just to get all the water out. Then we're gonna do a close-up so you see how the tank is affixed to the seat of the toilet. I'm gonna finish this up. There's really no sense in you watching me do this over and over again. So I'm gonna turn the camera off, finish taking the water out of this tank, and then I'll show you how the tank is affixed to the seat. I've taken out all the water now with the sponge. I'm gonna show you what it looks like. Here you have a bolt and another bolt, and those bolts will go through the base of the toilet, and there are different connecting types of mechanisms. This particular toilet has wing nuts that are attaching the bolts underneath. I'll show you what that looks like. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my flathead screwdriver and I'm going to hold the bolt in place while I use my other hand to reach underneath and unscrew those wing nuts. It's going to be kind of hard for me to hold the camera in the perfect position for you to see it. I just want you to know what we're doing as far as the process is concerned. After I take those wing nuts off, I'll be able to just lift the tank straight up. So I took those bolts out and I lifted the toilet tank up. One thing I did forget to say in the previous cut is not only are we going to take those bolts out to release the tank from the seat, but we also needed to disconnect the water line from the base of that tank. So here's what the water line looks like when it's disconnected from the tank. There's going to be a little bit of water, even though you've turned the valve off and you flush the tank, there's going to be a little bit of water left in that supply line. So just have some extra rags around because that water is going to spill on the floor. There's really nothing you can do about it, and it's perfectly fine. It's very clean water as well. The next step in removing the toilet, because as I had mentioned before, there's a caulking seal around the base of the toilet, I'm going to take my utility knife and I'm going to cut around the caulking. That way when I take the bolts off from the floor, I'm able to just lift the toilet straight up. Make sure that you have a very sharp blade on your utility knife so that it can get through that caulking. I'm going to run this knife along the base of the caulking, or the base of the toilet seat, through the caulking a few times. So again, I'm going to turn the camera off because you don't have to watch that entire process. But just know I'm using a utility knife to cut through that old caulking to release the seal. I've run my utility knife now through that caulking to release the seal. And now I'm going to take this wrench and I'm going to undo the nuts that are holding the toilet seat down on those bolts. So I'm going to show you what those look like. This is a simple process of lefty-loosey, righty-tighty. We're taking it off, so we're just going to turn those bolts to the left. And I'm going to do the process on the other side of the toilet now as well. The next step in removing the toilet is lifting the toilet off of the ground. Ideally, we just lift the toilet straight up. We don't want to damage any of the sewer collar that's underneath the toilet, the collar being the material that the wax ring sits on. I'm going to rock it back and forth just a little bit. I'm not going to be able to hold the camera and show you that. But just know what I'm doing is I'm lifting the toilet straight up. I know that there's still going to be water inside that toilet. And what I do to prepare ahead of time, I'll take a 42-gallon contractor size trash bag. It's a nice thick material. I put that on the floor. I roll the lid or the top of it back a little bit so it stays open. I'm going to lift up the toilet and then put it directly into the bag. That way it contains the water that's still left in the toilet and we avoid making a big mess. I took the toilet off and now we can see the wax ring exposed underneath. It's exactly what I thought. It's just an old wax ring that has just disintegrated over time. I'm going to show you what that looks like right now while it's still sitting on top of the collar. I have a new wax ring that we're going to install on the new toilet, but I just want you to see the color of the new wax versus the old wax. You can tell that that's just so old and disintegrated. There's no way that it could hold all the water in there correctly. So it's a wonderful thing that we have a new toilet going in there and we knew what this problem was. Now this place had been vacant for quite a while. What I noticed is there's water pooling right in here. And if this toilet had been used repeatedly in this dilapidated condition, it could ultimately ruin the floor underneath this tile. And that would be a big problem. A lot of times if you have a toilet that's on a second floor, there's going to be wood subfloor underneath whatever type of material you have down on the bathroom floor. And if there's repeated water damage going on there, it's going to ruin that subfloor, and it can actually go through that floor into the ceiling of whatever room is below. So you want to make sure that whatever kind of ring you're using, wax ring, is going to be of a substantial material. This is an extra high reinforced wax ring that I'm going to use. I use that on all the toilets that I replace just because it gives me an extra bit of it gives me extra security. So again, just look at the color of this versus the color of that. It was time for that ring to go. Up next, we need to remove the caulking from the floor. So I'm just going to use this razor blade here. Typically I use a razor blade that's attached to a scraper. Unfortunately, some of the crew that I had here yesterday, they packed that up in their toolboxes. So I'm resorting to just using this little razor for now. But you know, we got to keep going. It's a very, very simple process. So you can see it comes right off. Whatever kind of residue is left from the scraping, I'm just going to be able to use an adhesive remover, and it's just going to wipe right off of that tile. So again, I'm going to put the camera down, finish scraping off all this old caulking, clean this up. Then I'm going to paint the walls. As I had mentioned before, I'm painting the walls in this bathroom. So now that the toilet is removed, I can access this wall very easily. So I'm going to clean this up, let it dry. I actually should make a point here. I'm going to take old rags and I'm going to cover up this hole so that while I'm working in this bathroom and this drainage hole is exposed, these rags will catch anything that could potentially go down that drain and create a clog down the line. Now that the paint is dry on the walls, I'm going to be taking out the old wax ring, and I'm going to be taking out the old bolts that were going through the collar and holding the toilet base in place. Now this can get very messy just because that wax is very sticky. So I have my gloves on and I have a rag, so I can just take care of whatever type of sticky residue is going to remain. So I'm going to take out the rags that were blocking up that hole so that nothing would fall into it. And I'm going to give you a close-up over here so you see what it looks like. You just take your hand and you remove this collar. I actually need to use two hands, so I'm going to put the camera down. But as soon as I'm done, I'm going to give you a close-up of what this looks like. Now that the old wax ring is off, I'm going to show you what it looks like up close. You have two slots, one on either side of the sewage drain, and you're going to take your bolts and slide them into those slots. Okay, now before I go on further, I had mentioned that I use reinforced extra high wax rings. So over here you can see the ring that came with the toilet. This is part of the toilet install kit. And over here I have the reinforced wax ring. So you could just see how high that is. Actually, I'll put it against the wall so you can see the difference. The reinforced wax ring really will give a much better seal. So now I'm going to turn the camera off, I'm going to go get the bolts, and I'll show you how those are installed. This is what the bolt looks like that's going to be attaching the base of the toilet to this collar. So you'll see it has kind of an oval shape to it. All we do is we slide this right into place like that. Now I'm going to put a washer on top of this bolt and take the nut and tighten it up. I've tightened up those bolts and I'm just going to show you with my fingers here. When you wiggle it back and forth, there really is no give. It's a very solid grip that these bolts get on the collar here for the drain. What we're going to do next is take the toilet base out of the packaging, going to put that wax ring on the base of the toilet, and then lower the toilet into place. So in one moment, I'm going to show you what it looks like when that wax ring is sitting on the base of the toilet. Here's what the wax ring looks like when it's sitting on the hole of the toilet over here. Obviously this toilet is upside down. You just want to push down a little bit, make sure that the wax makes a sticky connection to the underneath of the toilet. I'm going to flip this toilet over, okay? And then I'm going to lower the entire unit down onto that sewer line, and I'm going to line the bolts up with these two holes. So again, I have to turn the camera off because I need both hands to do this, but I'll show you what it looks like as soon as it's installed. Now we have the toilet base on the floor. You'll see that the bolts are lined up and they're sticking through the base of the toilet. The way this particular kit came, it has these little plastic washers that you drop over the bolt. Just like that. We'll do the same on this side. And this one has wing nuts that are used to affix the base of the toilet to that bolt. So I'm going to put these on right now. Once those are securely fastened, you just want to give the toilet bowl a little bit of wiggle back and forth. Make sure that that wax ring is affixed nice and snug, and make sure that you've tightened those wing nuts appropriately. This looks good to go, so now I'm going to move on to installing the tank. This particular tank just has two bolts that will go through the back two holes here. Now there's a rubbery foam gasket that goes right here. Just pop that in place, lift the tank, and put it down onto the base. So this particular tank has two bolts, and what we do is we take this washer and we put the washer on the bolt first, and then we use this wing nut and we tighten up the tank to the seat or to the base. Now we want to make sure that it's tight enough so that this tank is not rocking back and forth, but we don't want to make it so incredibly tight that the porcelain actually cracks. So be careful about that when you're affixing the tank to the base of the toilet. Now that the tank is securely in place, you'll see I'm rocking it back and forth. It's not moving. The next step is to connect your water supply line, and that's located right over here. So I'm going to connect this, then we're going to turn the water supply on, let the toilet fill up, and then we're going to give it a test flush. Notice I'm doing all of this before I put the toilet seat on, and I'm not caulking the base of the toilet. I want to make sure that there are no leaks underneath first. So we're going to give it a test run. I've turned the water on, not full blast. I've just given it kind of like a quarter turn. So in case there are any leaks, I can turn it off quickly without making a whole mess under here. And you can see that so far, everything is filling very nicely. There's no leaking under here with the supply line. So I'm going to let this run, and we'll give it a test flush in just a moment. Moment of truth has arrived, so everything is filled up, and we are going to give it the test flush. And hopefully you will not see any water coming out of the base of this toilet. There you have it. No leaks. Okay, so we've successfully installed this toilet. Next step here, we're just going to put the tank cover on. I'm going to attach the seat, and ultimately I'm going to put caulking around the base of the toilet. Because I'm working on a flip here, I still have to clean up this tile because it's pretty grimy, so I'm going to do that before I put the caulking bead around the base of the toilet. But all in all, successful toilet installation. You guys can do it. It's really not that difficult. Just have a little bit of patience and you'll be on your way to happy flushing. If you have any questions about this video, please leave a message in the comments below, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And if you'd like to see more tutorials, click the subscribe, like, and notification symbols. We are working hard to make informative videos and show you behind the scenes of our day-to-day activity flipping houses. Thank you so much for watching Flipping Dust. Happy home improvements, and see you soon.